Elden Ring has taken over all of my free time, and obviously I'm not alone in this. Even a month out from its release, people are still obsessing over it, trying to uncover new mysteries and playing with the game's systems to find new and interesting ways to approach the game. It's such a gargantuan achievement from top to bottom that it's hard to compare its scope and scale to anything else. Developer FromSoftware have a long history of making games people love to discuss for years after their release, for better or worse. And their impact on the industry, especially under the helm of designer Hidetaka Miyazaki, has led to a surge of more subdued storytelling, world building, and exploration of lore that is on the player to uncover, rather than the games explicitly telling them so. Despite there being a stigma around it due to a loud and toxic minority, the magic of the Souls games has always been the community. The stories shared between friends and strangers who have all experienced the same enigmatic game from different perspectives.
This way, tarnished. May I have a word?
On the surface, it's very easy to write the Souls series off as pretty light on story. Especially when compared to other modern games, it lacks the staples that are associated with good storytelling, like interwoven cinematic cutscenes throughout the game, and conversations with characters as you work through levels. In terms of cutscenes, there's the big introductory one, whatever ending you get, and then a small handful in between that all feel pretty disconnected from each other. And this sentiment has been around since Demon's Souls. Browsing the 2009 GameFAQs boards for Demon's Souls shows that these games were for people who don't care about story and just want the action. All filler, no killer. Gameplay is king. Games that didn't want lame old stories, like its contemporaries Dragon Age Origins and Uncharted 2.
Sorry to inform you this, but it seems that this generation players don't know what good games are and just go for hyped games like Halo, Killzone 2, and Gears of War. Frown.
As more games in the series were released and the Western fanbase grew larger and larger, this sentiment started to fade and was replaced by something truly amazing. A flourishing community that shares stories, lore, and theories with one another that only grows and gains momentum as the years go on. As time passed, more people's perspectives were shared about these games, their discoveries, their connections, their ideas, all within the online space. Not only were people putting together how to complete quests, but they were also answering the questions they presented about the greater context of the world and the ideals shared by the NPCs living there, most of which turned out heartbreaking. Things like Father Gascoigne's music box, his relationship with his family, and the tragedy he shares. Understanding things like this makes killing these bosses bittersweet. Yeah, Gascoigne lost his humanity, but a part of it lives on when you play the music of his now dead wife, who lays just behind him in the very arena you face him in. While you can stomp, roll, and fight your way through a Souls game, and have a very enjoyable time doing so, if you stop a moment and really take it all in, listen to every NPC, follow every thread, and read important items, there are deep stories of loss, hope, and all the space in between.
It's over, my son. It's dark. So dark.
And these elements are all at their best in Elden Ring. With the scope of the world expanding beyond anything we've seen from most games of this style, let alone within the Souls series, came a huge boost to the cast of characters and the very lands they inhabit. The biggest change that came with Elden Ring was bringing on legendary author George R.R. Martin, and while his influence may have been within the early stages of development, he did all the world building and a lot of the key bits of lore for Miyazaki to then age up and effectively destroy in only a way he can. The ripples of what Martin set in place can be clearly seen within the game. Even in the opening cinematic, we see a change in the usual Souls formula. Rather than naming all the bosses, the narrator names those who are tarnished and looking to grab the title of Elden Lord for either themselves or in service for someone else. It's extremely George R.R., but it works really well in helping these names sit with you when it comes time to meet them later. This really gets to the core of Souls stories though. While they might be pretty straightforward in some respects, it's the characters that really drive the heart of these games. And since Elden Ring has the biggest cast to date, there's so many chances to meet a new favorite along your journey. While that sounds pretty simple on the surface and in a lot of ways is, there's so much to dig into that makes it incredibly compelling and pushes players to see what's underneath to uncover. What is it specifically that makes Souls games this way? Why more than any other community has this admiration for solving secrets and mysteries emerged? This approach to games wasn't unique and born from Souls. Hell, even prior to Hidetaka Miyazaki joining FromSoftware, the company took a similar style with their Kingsfield series. Dark Souls just happened to become the most popular modern game that did it. Nintendo's early games like the Metroid and Legend of Zelda series are early examples of this kind of storytelling, as their original lore and stories were told through instruction booklets rather than in-game, making them action-orientated first and story-focused second. You didn't need to know what you were doing or why, but the option was there if you wanted it. Obviously, as technology evolved and storage space on cartridges and discs increased, the stories could be brought even more into the games themselves. 2001 was a landmark year for games. It saw one of the most important titles maybe of all time released to little fanfare from audiences, but huge praise and a new source of inspiration for the 2 decades since. That game being Ico. Ico is like your favorite game designer's favorite game. Even if you've never played it, chances are extremely high that you have played something that was influenced by it. Ico features only a small handful of cutscenes and a pretty subdued story, but in spite of that, it is dripping with an atmosphere that weaves between oppressive and hopeful, keeping players on their toes as they platform and fight to save Yorda. Lead designer Fumito Ueda wanted to create as immersive an experience as possible, stripping the game of all but its absolute fundamentals. Designed by subtraction, as he called it. Despite its low sales at the time and slow rise to recognition by the wider gaming community as a whole, Ico became a cult classic. More importantly though, by chance, Miyazaki happened to have played Ico at a friend's house.
On a personal note, after graduating from university and starting a new job, I was away from games for a while when I happened to play Ico at a friend's house on a recommendation. It was a beautiful, untold experience and story that I had never imagined, and I'm very sorry to my friend, but I was quietly moved in silence. And that's when I left the company I was working for at the time and started working for FromSoftware. I'm not exaggerating when I say it was the game that changed my life, and I'm proud that it was Ico and Mr. Ueda's game.
Any fan of modern FromSoft can tell you that they proudly wear their inspirations on their sleeves. They make no attempt to hide that fact. From the character designs of Berserk, the stories of William Sharp, to real-world locations such as the Milan Cathedral in Italy. But when it comes to the actual gameplay, Ueda's design by subtraction philosophy can be seen right at the heart of it. In 2009, I experienced Demon's Souls in the same way Miyazaki experienced Ico, and it opened my eyes to the possibilities of what games could be. I played this weird game that was imported from Korea to a locally owned game store in a vacuum, and it was one of the best gaming experiences I've ever had. This brutally hard game absolutely wrecked me for months on a near daily basis, and I couldn't talk about it enough to anyone who would listen. I didn't realize it then, but this was the beginning example of Ueda's design by subtraction coming by way of Miyazaki. It may seem juvenile in retrospect, but at the time this game stripped away anything that had become unnecessary to make room for more in-depth mechanics and world building. Although at the time I didn't understand a single thing that was happening in the game lore-wise, I just wanted to see how other people handled the extreme difficulty and share any knowledge I had to impart on them. Back then, I never cared about the why or what all these strange levels and people meant, just the how I was going about it. Looking back through those same GameFAQs message boards, it seems that this sentiment was felt by those, at least in the West, perhaps as a result of FromSoft's much smaller popularity. I have found posts that the game doesn't care about the story, it just wants you to play it, and how refreshing that was in the current year.
Yeah, the story is almost non-existent, but it hardly hurts this type of game. Honestly, a story would just slow this game down with cutscenes anyway.
The game actually isn't heavy on story. It's a standard evil gets unleashed and you're recruited to fight it deal. While this may sound fairly generic, the game is anything but.
I'm not saying no one cared about the story, just that the community building around it via message boards were more concerned about things like how to make co-op work and why a chunk of their health bar never recovered. Despite all this, one thing I think a lot of people who played the game at the time can agree on was just how good the atmosphere was. It felt oppressive, dark, moody, and really fit the struggle of dying a lot. Only now, digging deeper into the world of Boletaria, do I see just how dense it is, and with the experience that 13 years of playing a series can give me, do I understand that there is just so much life to the world and its characters. The game just makes you work for the satisfaction of finding what's going on rather than feeding it to you, subtracting traditional quest markers, leaving it at the basics of pure discovery. For example, Mephistopheles, she is deeply hidden within the game. You have to have killed another character, Yurt, and have pure black character tendency, which is a mechanic I didn't even understand, so of course I missed this entirely. Her quest is extremely involved, as she needs all those who know about the soul's arts dead, to help protect the secret of the ancient rite, and she helps players get a better understanding of the bigger things going on, and how all the NPCs act in their own interests rather than all of them working towards the same goal, an idea that only gets deeper as the series goes on. While its story and actual world building did not get the respect it deserved at the time, as many players missed it entirely, the mood did. I do think that early appreciation bled into their follow-up game, Dark Souls. Dark Souls is the perfect example of following up a game. While it's not a direct sequel, it does take almost everything interesting about Demon Souls and ramps it up. With that said, the biggest change for its lore and world building seemed like a rather small change on the surface. That being how it approached item descriptions. In Demons, item descriptions were more mechanical and traditional, only occasionally adding tidbits about lore. For example, the Talisman of Beasts that reads,
"An old wooden amulet featuring a symbolic depiction of the Old One can be used to cast both miracles and magic. What was considered a depiction of God was in fact an image of the Old One, portrayed as a force of feral chaos."
But since the levels are linear and disconnected from each world, there was no need to flesh items out with ways to progress further. So with a more open, interconnected level design, add item descriptions that assist not only with navigation, but also quests, helped encourage a wave of new players to get into the habit of opening the menu and reading more, which in turn led to the bits of lore strewn about the Kingdom of Lordran to stick in your mind as you continue to push through your quest. Not to say that people immediately latched onto the story in Dark Souls, but this along with the many more quests that had effects on the world, like freeing Lautrec from his cell in the Undead Parish, which leads to him killing Firekeeper Anastasia below Firelink Shrine, making that fire unusable until you seek him out in Analondo to get revenge. Made it so players were more involved in the world itself. There are so many small moving pieces to this quest that force player interaction, specifically picking up the black eye orb off of Anastasia's body and reading the item description.
Mystical orb found on a keeper's corpse. Invade the world of the murderer of a firekeeper to defeat the perpetrator and reclaim the soul of the firekeeper. The black eye keeps constant watch on the city of the gods, Anor Londo.
It gives you a massive hint on where to go next. The other major thing that came with Dark Souls' growth and popularity, building from the hype of its predecessor and helped by better marketing, was community. As with its spiritual prequel, Demon Souls, on release Dark Souls was met with equal story doesn't matter, it's pure gameplay opinions, until people started doing some digging and creating content on various social media platforms, most notably YouTube. One of the biggest contributors to the Souls community at the time and still to this day has been Vati Vidya, uploading his first lore video on the 26th of September 2012, just a little over 1 year after the release of Dark Souls and a month after its DLC, Artorias of the Abyss. Vati made a video detailing the lore of its titular character and how he related to the game's world and overarching story, using camera tools, cinematics, and artwork to tell a story in a way that brought it all together in one easy to digest package, launching not only his own series Prepare to Cry, but many others interested in the finer details and goings on within FromSoftware's Souls series. The release of each title since Dark Souls has been accompanied by videos exploring theories of what the crumbs left by FromSoft might mean. Each game offered new stories for players to latch onto and run with, constantly building from what came before. And this kind of storytelling that has grown from title to title, as well as the community around it, has been at its best in Elden Ring. The launch window of a Souls game is always an exciting time. But now, more than ever, it feels like something truly special. Elden Ring is a monumental achievement on so many levels, and is in a lot of ways the amalgamation of over a decade of crafting a certain kind of experience, one led on design by subtraction. Now in a true open world setting, Elden Ring's biggest attraction to the tired formula of this genre, like its older siblings, was one of quest markers. This was a small but meaningful change for the open world. Not only did it help keep the game in line with the rest of the series, when taking on the quest lines of NPCs, usually only small details are given to guide the player in vague directions, and if you miss a step or progress too far, you will more than likely miss the entire thing. It's a huge risk to take. cutting a giant portion of your player base out of discovering something, but it makes the find much more rewarding. You did that without the game giving you an explicit direction. With Elden Ring's much larger and less linear order, quests were given a lot more leniency with gating restrictions, but moments still act as checks, meaning it's very easy to miss steps in the giant world of the lands between. This less restricted and more open approach meant that the early days of discovery within a much larger community was one of both the reserved excitement of people speaking in riddled code, and at least for me, shouting in all caps and messages with friends about the places, people, and just general things I was finding. And all this, to me, as I said, is the magic of Souls. Community and the stories we tell each other. Every single game is so carefully crafted that discovery feels important. One of the very first things I did in Elden Ring after stepping out into the vast open fields of Limgrave was go east. I found the dragon-burned ruins, and after battling with its inhabitants, I opened a chest. But psych, it wasn't treasure, it was a trap. Now I was stuck deep in a Caelid cave, a much higher level area of the game fighting for my life. I didn't even have my horse Torrent yet, or a maiden with which to help me level up. Every attempt to get through this was slightly more successful than the last, and finally I got out, just to see this. I couldn't fast travel and my movement was limited, so I took a screenshot and sent it to a friend, and all he said was good luck. I know now that if I had just rested at the site of grace I found at the end of the cave, I would have been fine. But the even longer journey back to my original starting point created a unique experience that felt like it was mine, and in the end, helped me get invested in the world even more than I was already. There had been real stakes to what I went through, and if I had the game telling me what to do, maybe it wouldn't have felt like my accomplishment. This sort of non-linear progression of events happening on a semi-regular basis strengthened every single NPC encounter. Ending up in random places either by accident or by choice gave weight to exploration, even with a lack of control sometimes. I felt like I was doing something no matter what, and that goes even more for progressing different characters' plot threads. Since the lands between is absolutely massive and sprawls across so many different areas, finding characters feels like a treat. It is a rarity, and unlike previous entries where the majority of NPCs would be easy enough to find along the primary path, given that there is no true main path in Elden Ring, finding them becomes your charge. With that said, plenty of main NPCs needed for huge quests will start in pretty obvious spots. Fia, Corrin, and others are conveniently placed in Round Table Hold, offering bits of dialogue to start things off. Others can be found just off the main path, like Thops, who shares knowledge about the Academy Glintstone Key, or others will be a bit trickier, like one of my favourites, which can be found fairly early if you pay close enough attention. Blythe the Half-Wolf sits atop the Mistwood Ruins. When you first visit the forest, if you're paying close enough attention, you will hear a howl, and if you look up, you can even spot him yourself. Tell this to the first merchant you come across, Carle, and he'll give you an emote explaining it will summon Blythe. This section of his quest is completely optional, but helps you summon the Half-Wolf for a boss in the Forlorn Hound Everjail. This early encounter for me was yet another reason to get invested. I wanted to see through whatever it was Blythe was doing, so I did everything in my power to make that happen. It felt like if there was a little marker on my map telling me to check out Blythe, I probably wouldn't have cared as much. His story is cool, but me figuring things out myself and using the context clues the game gave me was just that little extra push needed for full investment into his story that spans almost the entire game if you see it through. On the opposite side, Fia is someone whose quest I didn't follow much at all. Since she gives you the debuff if you let her embrace you, I just didn't really trust her or want to engage much with what she has going on. After a while of playing, I found her again in the Deeproot Basin, and she asks this.
What is it you intend? To deny us and our ways, like the dogmatic brutes of the Golden Order?
And since the first option is to kill her, I did it. Normally the first option is the one that progresses the story, but this was a Miyazaki curveball and it stopped her quest dead in its tracks. And honestly, if this was any other game, that would seem obvious, but there are so many instances where the death of a character is just part of their story. What this really shows though is just how much of this and other Souls games you can miss either on purpose or by chance. Going back to Dark Souls 1, if you kill Lordrek in his cell because you don't like his vibe, the Firekeeper is never murdered, the bonfire doesn't go out, and you don't get to invade him to get Anastasia's soul back. It's a whole questline that passes you by because you chose to do something in the moment. That is why these games feel impactful. Every decision, no matter how small, feels important. It might not at the time, until a subsequent playthrough, or just telling your friends about what happened on your own journey before you realize its impact. It's these shareable moments that not only make a connection to the game, but that help foster a dedicated community of lore hunters and more. Tiny obscure moments that have cascading effects throughout the entire story. You feel like both the main character whose decisions affect the course of the game, and like a background extra who gets played for others' personal gains. Due to its awe-inspiring scope, the world is so big you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who found every single bit of story or quest on their first playthrough, just due to the hidden nature of Miyazaki's design of not being afraid to let important things pass players by. The world of Elden Ring is so much bigger than you and your quest. There are so many small threads that unravel major threads that even after 150 hours now, I'm still finding new areas that hold quests. Things that can dramatically change the entire course of the story for your character, hidden deep within areas that are incredibly difficult to traverse. It's astounding how many cool beats Miyazaki tucked away deep within the depths of Elden Ring. Every corner of the lands between is extremely well thought out, at least in terms of its existence within the world, like how the Carrion Study Hall links to the Divine Tower of Leonia, but only after progressing Rani's quest line, unlocking the statue to turn it upside down.
Statuette of a Scholar, with ground and sky inverted, reveals the hidden form of the Carrion Study Hall, which connects to the Divine Tower. To unveil the secret, affix it to the pedestal of the Celestial Globe,
pointing to Rani's defiance of the Two Fingers and how she retreated away, hiding her great rune from her siblings. Even smaller moments like the Windmill Village in Altus Plateau, where young maids are dancing in celebration and are generally non-hostile to the player despite being immediately attackable like normal enemies, but instead they just laugh and dance. It's an unsettling sight and a mystery I have still yet to uncover, but one that has stuck with me despite that. It's these kind of moments that make me just want to pore over every item description and watch every video I can just to see what it means. Sometimes an event can seem extremely random, like visiting the very bottom of Raya Lucaria, getting trapped inside an Iron Maiden, and having that teleport you to a section of the Volcano Matter, but only if it kills you with a grab attack. Maybe there is a lore reason for this, maybe there isn't, but it is one hell of a shareable moment to tell your friends about. The world just feels lived in, like things tick along even when you're not in the area to witness them. It feels like you have arrived at just the right time to witness something great, or you have just missed it by chance and now you have to pick up the pieces of what happened. Of course, you can just view this as set pieces of a video game designed to be a series of challenges to overcome, ignoring their greater context, and that's honestly fine. Like I said earlier, Souls games became popular before people dug into their lore, so Elden Ring isn't going to be the exception that gets everyone deep diving Vati videos, combing over wikis and Discord searching for answers, or even just watching Story Hunter streams. But this is easily the most accessible the series has ever felt, both in terms of how much there is to discover, but also the sheer amount of people talking about it, and putting in the hard work for people like me eager to have more answers to so many burning questions. One of the coolest hidden discoveries in Elden Ring is the lore of regression moment in Lindell on Korn's questline with Goldmask. After fighting the spirit of Godfrey, you can spot an item above you on a hard to reach alcove. After hunting around for a bit with how to actually get there, you get the spell Lore of Regression. If you were paying attention earlier in this dungeon, you would have found a message on the ground that says, "Regression alone reveals secrets." This is a developer left message, but looks like any other white stone players can leave, so it's easy to miss. Use your new spell here and the statue of Radagon changes to Marika with a new message saying, Radagon is Marika. This is a gigantic bit of lore to uncover, is required for Goldmask's questline, and uses a lot of the tools FromSoftware like to put in their games for players. It's the perfect example of missable content that feels important and amazing when you find it yourself. There are so many moments like this that it would be a gargantuan task in and of itself to list them all, so I'll leave that for someone who is way more qualified than myself. It is these little connections that keep the world of Elden Ring alive, finding out why there is a Margit and a Morgott. Seeing a name early in the game and many hours later seeing what it was in reference to is something special, and having you yourself draw that connection either through memory or even physically writing it down is extremely powerful. It means you made it yourself and didn't rely on anything in the game to do the work for you. It's a sense of rewarding exploration and discovery that encourages you to go out of your way at every corner to see what lays beyond, putting more dots on a board to draw together and paint the picture you made for yourself within the world. It may look different to someone else's, but it makes it your own. Even if you're piecing together the work of either videos or wikis made by others, the way in which you got the initial information is still yours. So no matter the path you take of self-discovery or joining the dots from many different places, it's still your own. There's a reason myself and millions of others love Elden Ring and the Souls series as a whole. It breaks so many conventions we've grown used to and either repackages them in a new and interesting way or removes them entirely to show you how differently things can play out. Because a lot of games do a lot of the work for you or give you explicit direction on where to go next, outside of initial conversations about your experience, it doesn't feel like there's much more to be discussed. Missing secrets, intricate lore, item descriptions, all of these things help keep the conversation going and are a major part of the staying power of FromSoft's hit franchise beyond its initial selling point of its difficulty. I don't think all games can benefit from this style, but I do appreciate it when it's done well, and a lot of newer games have taken this approach and made it their own. Games like Hollow Knight and Salt and Sanctuary put this in a 2D setting. Tunic made up its own language that unfolds not just bits of story, but maps and mechanics through an old school gaming manual. And even Breath of the Wild had players go out of their way to find hidden memories of Link to uncover his full story at the player's own discretion and ability to find obscure parts of Hyrule. Media is what you make of it, and the more a game allows you to make what you want from it, the more there is going to be to talk about. It feels like Elden Ring is a game that comes along once a decade and leaves a footprint in the industry so big, people will be talking about it for just as long, if not longer, due to just how much can be squeezed from its gameplay styles like Soul Level 1 runs, down to the very fabric that makes up its worlds, buildings and characters, the things me and so many other players latch onto and obsess over in the years after their releases. It also may be consciously or subconsciously be why people's favorite games within the series differ. There are mechanical ones, sure, but there is a reason so many people still love Siegmeyer of Katarina 12 years after the release of Dark Souls 1. And with Elden Ring, there's so many incredible characters and potential story arcs to find, I'm still trying to figure out who my number one is. And because of all of these things, I'm thankful for every little mistake, triumph, and accidental discovery I had in my journey that's past, and every one I will make in the future within the lands between.